at CRA since 2017. Before that, I did a European master, a double European master in nuclear engineering, first in Barcelona, second year in Paris. Before that, I did 4 years in industrial engineering in Barcelona. I have quantified risk analysis experience, and I've been the SMR business lead at CRA. Also, I attended the Safety and Molten Salt Reactor Summer School. Corporate Risk Associates, we are the thought leadership in risk management. We were founded in November 2000. We had a vision to produce highly focused risk analysis service. We are a specialist in risk analysis for the critical national infrastructure. We are about 45 technical consultants specialized in probabilistic safety assessment, human factor, human reliability, safety case. We are an SME, small medium enterprise. We have offices throughout the UK. Our clients are private and publicly owned companies as well as government agencies. We have a reputation for supplying high quality value for money services. We are ISO certified. Also, we run a risk forum every year. This is going to be next autumn, 2018. And if you like the conversation that we're going to have today, I invite you to all come to this forum, which is really good, and will be announced shortly in our webpage. So what is PSA or PRA? How is it called in the United States? So before understanding what is PSA, we have to have a look on which types of assessment there are. There are deterministic approach and probabilistic approach. Deterministic approach, it's the safety is achieved by meeting some black and white criteria. So in order to understand that, I'm going to put an example. So if we have a wall that needs to certify some criteria, so three tons load, if it can withstand these 3 loads, then it's safe. If it cannot withstand, then it's not safe. That is the deterministic way. Reality is that there is no such thing as safe and unsafe, but rather a degree of risk, either acceptable or unacceptable. What would be the probability of having 5 tons instead of 3? What happens if the load is moving instead of being stable? So the probabilistic approach puts more detail onto the deterministic bones. It models all identified potential outcomes using a systematic process. And what is important to understand that PSA does not invent new problems, but identifies shortfalls in the deterministic assessment. So let's go a little bit more into detail. So PSA is an established technique to numerically quantify risk, basically put a number on the risk. It sets out to determine what the undesired scenarios can occur, with which likelihood, and what are the consequences could be. And there are 3 levels. The first level, have a look on the core damage frequency. So what would happen in 3 Mile Island. So if this core damage frequency managed to get out of the containment, we have a source term, and that is what level 2 PSA looks at. And if this source term spreads, like in Fukushima, there is a level 3 PSA that looks at the atmospheric conditions and on the wind, and see if it goes to the sea or it goes to a city, and take into account the health and environmental effects. So what is risk? To understand it in a more graphical way, I presented here the alarm staircase. Basically, risk is a set of events that have a frequency times consequences. So basically, what it sets is that if the consequences of loss are very high, we only accept a very low frequency. So it is acceptable region. If the consequences are high and the frequency is high, we are in the unacceptable region, so we don't tolerate. And if we are in the middle on this as low as reasonable practicable, we are in the alarm region. And what does it mean is that we have to do anything reasonably practicable that we can do to further reduce the risk. If there is anything we should do, we have to do it and go to the acceptable. So what is the current view on SMR risk today? There are many small modular reactors in the near-term deployment or well advanced, as presented in the World Nuclear Association. Some of them are PWRs, but there are also coming generation 4 reactors like sodium fast cooled reactor, molten salt reactor, lead cooled reactor. And what about in the UK? So in the meantime, there is no GDA submission in the UK yet, but DEC started a competition on SMRs in 2015, and BASE started a new one on AMR very recently on 2017. What is the difference between SMR and AMR? Basically, AMR don't use live water as a coolant. Currently, Rolls-Royce is taking the lead in the UK SMR design and development. However, there are other overseas companies that show interest in the UK, like NuScale or Terrestrial Energy. So, in order to have a look into more detail into the risk, we have to see this number that is calculated from the PSA, this core damage frequency. And in order to compare it, we need to have what is seen today as the established number for the conventional nuclear power plants. So it's this 10 to minus 6 per reactor year frequency. This means that we have an accident every million of years, more or less. The only publicly available source that we have from core damage frequency at power, it sets out for an SMR at 3 10 to minus 10. This may seem that is because the conventional nuclear plants are not very safe, but this is not true. Conventional nuclear plants are quite safe, but they are very safe. But this a number over here is extremely low. In order to have a look on this, we have it in more detail below. So there is this 310 to minus 10 means 3 core melts in 10 billion with a B reactor years of operation. And to put it some concept, the age of the universe is estimated to be 14 billion years, more or less. So you can see here the numbers that are extremely low. So there is a huge uncertainty. What will happen in these many years? So we have to use the PSA as a tool to gain insights and take the numbers with a pinch of salt. This is a more graphical way of presenting. So 10 to minus 4 is the NRC, the regulators in the US. Operating PWR sets in between 10 to minus 6 and 10 to minus 4, and the SMRs are there. Many orders of magnitude, what they have presented. So we have to think about what about cutoff values, like internal hazards that may render many systems unavailable. So fires, floods, tsunami. Also, what about human performance? We all make errors. And it's not only the guy sitting in front of the computer that has problems. The computer itself was made by a human. So that also leads to problems and errors. Also, if we are thinking in some SMRs present remote operation, what will happen if it's from someplace outside the reactor? What happens if there is an external hazard like the flood? You cannot arrive to the nuclear power plant. So what about the risk during operation? This is what has been presented. But what about during transport? Because all these reactors are going to be transported either by train or by truck. What about refueling whilst others are in operation? What about decommissioning? Is the risk applicable? Also, to understand the risk, here is another graphical way. There is also always residual risk. So that means that many layers that you put, they are not concrete layers. They are something like a Swiss cheese model. So a good example is this one. It's about the propagation of a fire. So a fire can start in any place. So if the building design is really good, all the doors are gonna close. But what happens if, for example, we have a an object obstructing one of these doors, the fire then is going to spread. What happened with sprinkles or fire extinguishers? Maybe those type of equipment are tested often, but in the terms of years. So what happened if 2 months ago they failed? The fire is not going to be extinguished. Then we have the staff training, but if that staff panic when they see that the fire extinguishers don't work, or if a fire extinguisher don't work, so then it's gonna end in a catastrophe. So we need to think about what would happen if it did happen, irrespective of the very low core damage frequency. That's why level 2 and level 3 PSA are also very important for small modular reactors. So what do we know? So first of all, I would like to start with what we know about the risk today. So what are the factors influencing the SMR risk? In order to look on those, we have to look first of what we know. So a risk of a large nuclear plant sits in the acceptable region where there are higher consequences, but the frequency of those consequences are very low. So are there SMRs in the unacceptable region? Are they in the alarm region, or are they in the acceptable region? Let's see on the factors that influence that risk to understand it better. So first of all, if we're gonna have if we're gonna replace or introduce those small modular reactors, there are gonna be many of them. That means that what before it was only a big nuclear power plant, now it has 12, more or less. That means that if we assume that the core damage frequency is the same, what we know, that means that it's more risky. There is more risk of an accident happen just because there is more numbers of them. What about hazards affecting more than one unit? What about interaction between units? Because they are going to be sitting very next to each other. So a fire can affect more than one. What about human factors associated with reduced manning? Because there is not expected to be that many operators, or some of the developers assume that. What would happen if we are refueling one of these SMRs while the others are at power? What would happen if we lifting those SMRs, one fail on the other? There are many combinations, and that may increase the risk. So there would be a probable increase in risk if only looking on these factors. So maybe we are in the unacceptable region. But this is not all. What happened with the consequences? So that is a recent study that Imperial College of London have been studying with the support from CRA. So here we can see that there is probably lower consequences in case of an accident. So the difference between a large nuclear power plant, medium, and SMR. So is a level 3 PSA and how the radiation spreads in case of an undesirable event. So maybe we are shifting these consequences to a lower region. So we are in the alarm region. But also we have to count into passive systems. Most of these SMR have passive systems. That means that they don't require electricity. Are those passive systems like the one here, that instead of having pumps, they rely on a valve only and gravity? But they are still looking on this valve. What will happen if this valve there is a problem there? They cannot transmit the water to the reactor. Or are those passive systems like the one in the picture? So then there is no gravity, there is no valve to look on. So that's good news for NuScale, because the NRC agrees that NuScale SMR needs no backup power. This is very important. What it means that if a no-scale power station had been sitting on the coast of Japan and was inundated with a 15-meter high tsunami, it would not have mattered where its emergency diesel generator were installed. It would not have mattered that emergency connections for backup generators were also underwater, or that the batteries were flooded. So basically what it's saying that Fukushima tsunami would not have mattered about the diesels, but other things are important too. So maybe we are in the unacceptable region after all, but how do we know how much we go further up, how much do we go further left, and how much do we go further below? That's something that we need more research into. So my conclusions are that there are many factors that affect the nuclear safety risk for small modular reactors. There would be a probable increase in frequency due to a greater number of reactors and their interaction between them. There would be a probable reduction in consequences of an accident at each. However, there would be new technologies, Gen 4, like we have seen, molten salt, liquid fuel, liquid lead, that may introduce new consequences. So there is a lot of further work required to better understand how these consequences are lower, for how much. And there would be a probable reduction as well in the frequency of an accident at each. So the passive safety and non-reliance on electrical equipment will reduce that. So further PSA studies could support the demonstration of this. However, the current prediction SMR core damage frequency appears very low. So there is a huge uncertainty, and we recommend the use of PSA to gain as a tool to gain insights and a better understanding of the risk associated with the SMR to support their design, mainly when they come to the UK. Thank you very much, and very helpful to ask any questions.
Thanks, Bernard. So I think either people can type questions into the drop-down tab. It's just on the side panel on the right-hand side. So if you type any questions in there, I can read them out. Or if anyone wants to attempt to put their hand up, I can unmute them and they can ask a question verbally. So just... Okay, so it doesn't look like anyone's typed any questions in, so we'll probably cut off here, but I'll be sending around the recording link. Oh, hang on, sorry, we've just had one come through. So it's Aaron from Nuclear Grads. He's asked, do you see the UK following suit as the NRC in America and allowing no backup systems for NuScale or other SMRs?
Yeah, thank you very much. I do see that if the evidence is there, it's enough. So here in the ONR, we use the claims, arguments, and evidence. If the claims and arguments are enough and are simple enough to make the argument, and the evidence is there, I don't think any problems of presenting this to the ONR and the ONR to accept on that.
Okay, thanks, Aaron, and thanks, Bernard. So I'm going to send the recording round following the presentation, and I'll include your contact details in there, Bernard. So if anyone does have any further questions, are you happy for them to contact you directly, and you can speak to them that way?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.